Hello everyone, happy to have you today fly from the BGA, from the Blockchain Game Alliance. Very happy to have you today for today's video. Today's video, we're going to talk about blockchain gaming, obviously, but it's going to be a very interesting conversation as our purpose is to make a very good entry port for Avalanche for any blockchain game studios that we have in the BGA. Our member asked a lot of questions, and we really wanted to have the chance to ask Avalanche and Ed and Ava Labs to have some feedback. So before I welcome our wonderful speaker, I would like to pass over the mic for Rowan and Ray from Block Minds, proud member of the BGA as well.
Thank you. I'm Rowan here together with Ray, and we're proud members of the BGA indeed, from Block Minds. Block Minds is a small-scale independent consulting company for Web3 gaming. And in that role, we're really excited to be involved with these kind of events and help the BGA out with documentation on the different blockchains that could be utilized. So thank you so much for having us here, and we're looking forward to this conversation, Ed.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you very much, guys, for being here. And without any further ado, Ed, it's a pleasure to have you today. Very, very excited to have you on the show and to talk about gaming on Avalanche. Can you please start with a brief introduction of yourself, Avalanche, and its features that stands for blockchain gaming?
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm Ed. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I have been at Ava Labs for about 5.5 months now. So I lead up our gaming biz dev. We've got a team of about 5 folks that are focused purely on, Web3 gaming, and it's been really fun and a wild ride. Before this, I spent a little bit over 10 years in the traditional gaming industry, across startups, had my own agency, a stint in venture. But before this, I was actually at EA for about 5 years, leading strategy for our esports group. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Avalanche, we are a layer 1 EVM compatible. And we're known for a few different areas, which have traditionally been things like DeFi with a pretty high TVL. We've got a really strong kind of bridge that allows you to go back and forth between Ethereum really smoothly. And then most recently, kind of the big focus for us in the strategy here is subnets, which allow you to do kind of scale really well and allow you to deploy effectively your own kind of layer 1 as a service. Games like DeFi and Kingdoms and Krabata have launched their own recently, and we've got a lot more in the pipeline.
Awesome. So let me jump in on that. Actually, you're just mentioning DeFi Kingdoms and Krabata. And I heard in a previous interview that you said that they were currently 2 of your favorite Avalanche games. So to just jump into that direction, I'm curious, what do you think make these games so interesting, and what is it that other game developers can learn from these games?
Yeah, I think for both of these, kind of having that strong focus on community from day one has helped them a lot, right? Because you've got let's be realistic here. There are a lot of games that are in the similar vein with the kind of the 8-bit, really cool concept art and then RPG kind of world. Krabata is kind of modeled a little bit after Axie Infinity, and you've got these kind of battle mode battler games. But what's really cool is taking advantage of the really big community and the really strong community and kind of cultivating that and having network effects from folks creating things like with Krabata, right? They've the community has created a weekly radio show called Crab Radio, and it brings in a few hundred people every week who are huge fans, and they have memes and slogans and things like that. And then also just the ability to ship, right? I think watching the DeFi Kingdoms team run into some issues on Harmony, and then see the opportunity on Avalanche and be the first to launch a subnet and really innovate there. And a lot of things that they're releasing in this world is really, really cool. The Krabata team kind of built out this subnet called Swimmer Network. They're going to be publishing other games, and then also just recently announced a battle game. So kind of like what we're seeing right now is, as we all know, a month in crypto feels like a year in regular time. So the ability to kind of continually ship, put your heads down, and listen to the community is one that's probably really, really undervalued in Web3 gaming right now, given how quickly it's moving.
Yeah, that's definitely impressive, and it's got to be a difficult niche to specialize yourself in as a game developer, of course. So yeah, you're mentioning specifically that their ability to have community, grow community, and engage and interact with those communities is something that you were impressed with and that you find important. And that kind of makes me think of the guilds and everything that's with that and their influences on the amount of gamers and really the gameplay value. And I've heard you said before that you recognize that guilds and individual players, they migrate to other Web3 games as the profitability drops in the game. As we, for example, I've seen with Axie Infinity, but also some others. So I was curious, how do you think these migrations reflect on the intrinsic value of these games that we have currently? And how do you see the token and NFT economies genuinely become a value addition to these kind of games in the future?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the first thing that it highlights, though, is that we're so early in the overall scheme of Web3 gaming, right? I think you see a lot of games mirror the Axie tokenomics, where you have a governance token like their AXS, and then you've got kind of this infinite supply token, SLP, or in Cremata's case, it's CRA and TUS. And the reason why it's modeled after Axie is because Axie was so successful for so long. But as we all know, the buck doesn't stop there, and you're seeing some of the impacts of those early decisions on Axie, rearing its head now with SLP price kind of cratering. So I think we're still so early in this, and so we're going to continue to see token models innovate, right? There's questions around what really does a governance token do, and do people really care about that, right? How does that accrue value? Or one thing that we're talking a lot of our games about is why not come in with a single token that has a cap supply versus having two tokens, and it's maybe easier to manage. And there's different situations. And I think the other piece of what you're saying here is that we've got a lot of games these days that are kind of early in their roadmap, right? They might feel like more casual idle games, or kind of reskin DeFi protocols. They're all like heads down building out more core features. But I think as long as the games are still kind of in this idle, like more like chasing yield, it's kind of a rotator game, in that people are going to play a certain game, and then you want to try to get out before maybe the floor drops on the NFTs, and you go into the next new game. I think that the next wave now is we're waiting for more of these maybe core, like AA, AAA, like really fun to play experiences come out. And I think what you've seen a lot, and even with the guilds, right, with the scholar model, is that in that first wave, everybody playing expected to put in $5 and pull out $8 from the game, right? And that doesn't scale very well. In this next evolution, where we have games that are, you're playing because it's fun, and it's instead of playing, Valorant or League or Counter-Strike, you're going to play this blockchain game. Maybe you're getting a lot of fun out of it, and you're putting in $5, and you might pull out $2 for your time and for the NFT value that you're doing, and that scales a lot better in terms of, in bear markets, if the token goes down, or in bull markets where it goes up, like, you're still going. A large part of the reason why you're playing is because it's fun and your friends are all playing, and you have a community around that.
Yeah, awesome. And that actually also makes me think of like what I've heard you talk before about esports and guilds, and that you actually imagined that there is maybe a significant way that blockchain gaming can help esports and guilds like kind of merge together, especially given your background and interest in that. I'm a bit curious as what is your vision in seeing that move towards the future?
Yeah, I think I've said before that I feel like it's a race, right? Esports teams are trying to become guilds before guilds become esports teams. And what I mean by that is, esports teams have the scale. They've got a ton of funding behind them. They've got really strong influencers and pro teams and networks in traditional Web2. They've got Twitch streamers, YouTube creators. And so they've got kind of that top of the funnel that guilds really desire, right? Guilds at the core, they might have 1,000 or 2,000 scholars, but that's a fraction of the esports fan base. So for guilds, they're looking at these esports teams, and one of the big value adds they can offer to any Web3 game today is the ability to bring users in. But 2,000 users is great, but like millions of users that esports teams have access to is even better, right? And as right now, like there's probably 15 million wallets total in all of Web3 gaming. And you look at like the billions in Web2, like how do you convert that and kind of move to a bigger slice of the pie, right? So guilds are looking at esports teams, and they're like, man, we need to bring on influencers and competitive teams, and we need to stream. And they're trying to kind of grow that part. Esports teams have all the audience, but their monetization ability is pretty low, right? Like the dollar revenue per esports fan is like really low compared to traditional sports. And so esports teams are looking at guilds and saying, wow, like these Web3 games can have a few hundred, a few thousand players, yet there's a lot of money to be made right now in some of these games. And so, you know, they're trying to kind of move upstream into like saying, okay, well, how do we get involved in this? How do we get earlier? How do we help market this in a way that's fan friendly? And then you throw in all the, you know, the ups and downs with crypto right now, and certain pro players and influencers may be hesitant to advertise something. And so, you know, you've got kind of this metagame going on of like certain esports teams are maybe like taking on some blockchain or exchange sponsors, and that's like the most they'll do in crypto. And then you'll see a few that are going really deep right now, and that, you know, if Web3 gaming becomes something, which I think we all believe it will, I think those esports teams that are investing now are going to reap a lot of the dividends down the road.
Yeah, and around that mission for mass adoption, you previously mentioned gaming, and actually we tend to agree with that. You previously mentioned gaming to be an opportunity to increase Web3 adoptions. Why gaming made it such a good fit, early use case for blockchain, according to you? And how do you foresee traditional gaming audiences coming in the Web3 games?
Yeah, I think, you know, gaming is something understood by everybody, right? And even if we talked about earlier, you know, even some of the early Web3 games out there, they're effectively like lowering that on-ramp to explain something like DeFi to people, right? People, like your layperson may look at like a DeFi protocol and be like, I don't understand this. I don't understand the terminology, but they understand gaming and, you know, staking something and having an item and then exchanging that and transacting that. So, you know, we believe that can extrapolate itself to a much larger base in terms of, again, these AAA or these core game experiences where you can integrate things like an in-game DEX, right? Which a lot of these games kind of have more of a fiat perspective, or in-game items on the blockchain. So it incorporates a lot of these kind of Web3 philosophies and technologies that we're seeing kind of today. And then to answer your question in terms of, you know, how we see Web2 coming into the space, I think you've got kind of this spectrum, right? You've got some traditional Web2 publishers that are like dipping their toe in the water. They're saying, hey, we're going to put some items on the blockchain, and then, you know, that will be our Web3 strategy. And that hasn't worked too well, because oftentimes, you know, their main player base and their customers may not understand blockchain as well. And right. And Web3 is all based on headlines. So on one hand, you have people that are screaming like Web3 eyes everything. And then on the other spectrum, you have people saying like NFTs are a scam and you're burning down the rainforest. Right. And so, you know, we do see a lot of publishers who are being a lot more methodical about this, and that they're assembling a team. They're thinking about this the right way. Most likely you're not going to see like the tier 1 IP or games be put on the blockchain yet, because, you know, that is like their revenue source. They're going to be very careful around that, but kind of spinning up new tests or new platforms. And then even figuring out like the right go-to-market strategy and positioning to be able to, you know, onboard this next generation of potential Web3, you know, wallets, as well as the tech around that required to onboard really seamlessly, right?
We've gone through some of your previous interviews, and you've named onboarding of new audiences one of the key opportunities or features of blockchain for Web3 game developers. What kind of partnerships and tools for this purpose would be at the disposal of a game developer that wants to turn their Web2 game into a Web3 game on Avalanche?
Yeah, I think it really starts at making that friction as seamless as possible, right? So I think all of us on this call, participating on this call, like we've gone through the pain points of installing MetaMask on your browser and then figuring out where to save your private key. Do I print it out? Do I put it on a cloud storage? And then, you know, adding the RPC for a new network like Avalanche, and then importing the tokens, and then figuring out all that kind of stuff. Like Web2 gaming just works out of the box. Like I sign up for a Steam account, I download the game, put my credit card down, and I'm off to the races, right? So the more we can minimize those steps, the better. So I think it starts with just like a really seamless on-ramp experience. You should be able to use a third-party provider like a Wire or a MoonPay or a Stardust or an FTX white label, sign up, put your credit card down. They create a custodial wallet for you that you don't have to manage like the private key. And that should be abstracted in the sense that once I hop into the game, I shouldn't necessarily know that I'm playing a Web3 game until maybe, oh, cool, you can actually sell these items on a third-party marketplace and make real money from that, or these tokens or this currency that I'm getting in game, this actually has real-world value, and then I can exchange that on a decentralized exchange or a centralized one for some actual money. That's when kind of the Web3 factor should come in. And so figuring out the best way to again decrease those steps to get someone in the game and actively playing is probably top of mind for us. And you're seeing that actually this past week where so many, Coinbase announced like their wallet that can be used everywhere, right? And then Robinhood announced that they're building their own wallet. We've announced we're building our own wallet a few months ago. So I think a lot of folks in this space are thinking similarly about how to reduce that friction.
Yeah, we have a lot of different blockchain gaming projects in the BGA. I mean, we have well advanced blockchain game. They have a very specific view about what they want to do in terms of blockchain and everything. But we also have, and this is the purpose of the BGA, to be able to onboard any Web2 gaming studio to who understand perfectly what does it mean to have a blockchain games, but they need to figure out in what blockchain they want to build something. So that we got a lot of question around support for sure, obviously. With the Avalanche Foundations and yourself, do you have a clear focus on supporting game developers? And can you highlight the support system for game developers entering your ecosystem in terms of documentation, resources, training, Avalanche as well?
Yeah, so I think there's a wide range of support that we offer, and I think it starts with the early conversations and what I talk to a lot of our games about, which is even when they're like, hey, like, so how do we deploy, or like, how do we talk about investment or co-marketing and things like that? For us, it really starts with, let's make sure, the Avalanche tech and the chain can work for what you're looking to do and where you're looking to go, right? We get a good amount of also projects that are currently built on other chains that are saying, hey, it's not doing the trick for me. So can we talk about Avalanche? We want to make sure that doesn't happen to us down the road as well if you decide to build, right? So it really starts with, let's drill into like, make sure you understand the tech and how this all works, and that it can fit in with what your engineering team is trying to do, right? So we go pretty deep there. We work with a wide variety of publishers, right? Some of them say, we've got a whole blockchain team and we've been researching for 6 months and we know we want to build here, like leave us alone and we'll let you know if we need help. That's great. We've also got publishers that are deploying their first smart contract and we need to kind of handhold them and help them in that process. And then everything in between, right? So that's the first step. And then, once they're pretty familiar and they start to understand like the potential of what they can do with subnets and bridging technology and all that kind of stuff, and they get excited, then we can kind of start talking about other parts of that ecosystem, right? So we've got a fund. It's called the Blizzard Fund. It's an ecosystem fund that we use to invest into the ecosystem. So NFTs, gaming, DeFi, that's always an option. We've announced a few different incentive programs, right? One of them is called the Multiverse incentive program that's geared around subnet deployment and incentivizing usage and adoption of subnets. That's something that we can talk about. And then, co-marketing is great. We've got a whole like PR and comms team. We've got a marketing team that puts together these campaigns. I go on Twitter Spaces a lot with our different games and try to kind of expose them to the world. And then we've got a really strong like 360-degree ecosystem on Avalanche, right? That's launch pads, that's guilds and DAOs, that's DeFi protocols, that's DEXs, including arguably like one of the largest DEXs in crypto and Trader Joe, and all those types of components. And so those are all like strong value adds. And then of course we try to really like foster this strong community in that, we always recommend that any game, whichever chain you're evaluating, go talk to games that have deployed there and then kind of get a feel for their own experience, because that's going to be, the best kind of sample size versus hearing it from me, right?
Maybe a short follow-up. For the larger publishers, it's easy to find contact with Avalanche, but for the small to medium enterprise game studios or maybe smaller development teams, Are there currently any ecosystem partners or projects in Avalanche actually focusing on providing infrastructure for companies like them, or is it still mainly Avalanche itself or the Ava Labs Foundation?
Yeah, I think definitely yes. So I think as much as we'd like to say we've built out every component that you need, like that doesn't scale very well, even with the team that we have, because we're focused on kind of building that protocol, like the wallet, like other things around that, right? So we heavily rely on third-party partners that we really trust. So, you know, things like bridging technology, or even like custodial wallets, or, you know, backend as a service, like your Stardust and FTX white label, bridging technology like Synapse or Layer Zero, like even like auditing, you know, audits being done by third parties. Those are all like we've got our infrastructure, select infrastructure partners, and those are ones that we kind of broker the connections to with our games. And you know, every game implementation is different and deployment's different. So we've got a variety of solutions, and you know, by now the gaming team has worked with all different types of deployments, and we're pretty familiar with what goes into that and what's required.
And maybe late last year, we were very enthusiastically bridging over our assets into Avalanche. And actually, that was a very nice aspect that Avalanche started with a bridge. And in that sense, I'm very interested. To what extent are you interested in Avalanche becoming a multi-chain hub? Or are you guys focused mainly on Avalanche itself?
Yeah, I think you know, we are focused on adoption of Avalanche, but the future is multi-chain, right? I don't think it's a zero-sum game in the sense that everything is going to be deployed on just one chain. So we also need to be pretty dynamic in how we support that bridging. So while I think we are very focused on kind of growing the gaming ecosystem on Avalanche, we're also very well aware that there are other games that are deployed elsewhere and want to come here and support the ecosystem here. And I think, you know, DeFi Kingdoms is one good example where they're still on Harmony, and they were originally deployed on Harmony, but they've built this new world and experience on Avalanche. And I think it goes back to this, right? If you're just kind of copy and pasting the same experience on multiple chains, you're probably not going to get a lot of movement because it's not going to be meaningfully different, right? But if you can come up with a meaningful multi-chain narrative of maybe a new token on Avalanche, or a new experience, or a new level or feature, then that can get pretty interesting. And so that's where we'll work with the different games and give them suggestions in terms of what we've seen. But you know, the future is multi-chain, and we want to be able to support that pretty dynamically. And I think you've seen that with the bridge and other games that we've worked with.
Yeah, fantastic. So then what makes launching on Avalanche a good entry point to this eventual multi-chain future, you think?
Yeah, I think look, the biggest differentiator that we have is really subnets right now, especially for games, right? In the sense that we like to use like the cities analogy, where you think of a blockchain, right, as a city, and as more and more people move in, the cost of real estate gets higher, like the gas fees and the congestion gets higher. What we allow for is really horizontal scaling, in the sense that we're in New York City and the C chain is getting, you know, real estate costs are going up on the C chain. We can then work with the game and say, hey, we're going to give you a whole new piece of real estate next to it, right? And you get to manage. You know, it's a lot less crowded. The costs of building are much lower, and you can do really cool things like set your own rules, right? So things like, imagine having a custom gas token. So instead of requiring AVAX or ETH as your gas token, you can have your game token as the gas token. You know, you can set your own validators and have rules around that as well. So that is a key differentiator, as well as just like the ease of use and implementation on our platform. You know, we don't have the cheapest gas fees. We're always kind of improving on that. But I think we're very proud to say that even in times of very high congestion over the past few months, the chain hasn't gone down, but gas fees have gone up. But that's kind of a feature of how the blockchain is structured.
Oh, it's great that you start going into subnets there, because of course that's one of the points of interest that we have with Avalanche as well. We've seen that some games like Carabada and DeFi Kingdoms are actually already running their own subnets, but there's also still a lot of games out there that are not running their own subnets, but still utilizing Avalanche, like Pizza Game and some other like maybe smaller ones like that. Can you pinpoint the moment from which it really becomes interesting to start your subnet, opposed to just like having the technology as a token?
Yeah. So I think that there's probably a blend here of, at a high level, how much of your game is on chain versus off chain, right? How many transactions each user is doing on average, and then of how much of the the general bandwidth space that your game is taking up. And Krivada kind of checked both of those boxes in the sense that it was taking anywhere between 20 and 40% of the gas fees on the C chain at any given moment, right? That's a good chunk of that, as well as most of that game is on chain in the sense of collecting your mining rewards and looting and transactions and setting your team and morphing and all that kind of stuff, right? So at a certain point, it could get pretty costly to kind of run through the user story, if you will, of a typical user. And so that's when they started to look at a subnet. So, really, like, we recommend, as again, the bandwidth required that you're taking on the blockchain is going up and taking more and more of that public chain, to start looking at that. If there are games that are looking at doing really interesting things like custom gas tokens and rewarding their validators in that sense, it makes a lot of sense to move to subnets as well.
Yeah, and talking about moving to subnets, like we've seen it happen in the past before. Like, for example, Pocket World, that basically is porting now to the Avalanche subnet with its metaverse. I think High Rise World, which actually originally was launched like 5 years ago or something like this, right? So I was curious, can you tell us more about the features that are enabled by this migration for them to Avalanche, and the process of migrating from such a pre-existing metaverse or a game environment to the Avalanche ecosystem? And are you personally involved with this one? Do you know them?
Yeah, we're really excited about the Pocket Worlds team. Super legitimate. Like, they've been building kind of in social, in Web 2. They're backed by top VCs, including Y Combinator, Bitcraft, a bunch of others. So we've been working pretty closely with them. Like, we're still kind of early in that implementation, but we're really excited about what they're doing. And I think you look at something there where it's kind of this self-hosted world in a sense, right? DeFi Kingdom is a similar example in that DFK has their own DEX, right? They have their own kind of marketplace where you can buy the heroes. And in a perfect world, you can have all of that in the subnet. So users will need to bridge their assets in, whether it's tokens, whether it's NFTs, or if you're building from scratch, you can mint everything and deploy everything natively into that subnet. But in a perfect world, it's kind of like this self-contained city, in that you don't need to go outside the city to go buy your groceries or shop for clothes. Everything is within that, and you very rarely need to leave. And so, with the Pocket Worlds experience, there's going to be a lot of really cool things like DeFi and DEX and marketplaces and lands. But ideally, everybody would be able to be self-contained in there. And what was really attractive to them is the ability to do stuff like that, paired alongside, using their in-game token as the gas token. So again, another sync there. And then just really like the scalability. You never want to have to worry about, is it too expensive to do anything? It should be pretty seamless. It should be a no-brainer of like, yeah, absolutely, I want to go buy this in-game item right now, or I want to go to this land, or I want to go do that and play with my friends. And that's really unlocked with subnets and what we're really excited to bring them over on. And it is the first kind of native Avalanche metaverse, right, that we're investing in and partnering with. And one of the attractive pieces is not only like the team and how great they are at executing, but the fact that they're going to be able to bring in a significant chunk of their existing user base, right? They've got over 2 million MAUs. And even cooler is that actually, I think 3/4 of their user base today is female. And so like the idea to kind of bring this new demographic into Avalanche is really exciting, of course.
Yeah, that's really great to see. And I can understand the excitement also around the subnets, and that now you see the first players really enter that and using those technologies. And let's see along with like how it's gonna go with Pocket World moving onwards. But yeah, it's something that really is a big focus of Avalanche. And you were talking about grants before. And you've actually, like, Avalanche did launch the Avalanche Multiverse grant, if I'm correct, which is really focused on incentivizing developers of all shapes and forms. So not only the gaming developers, to kind of like start to adopting these subnet technologies. What can you tell us about this program? How can you appeal to it? When is it relevant? What kind of people are you looking for with that?
Yeah, and so the slight clarification I'd offer is like we're framing it as an incentive program, in the sense that it's not like we're going to pay you to come build, but it's more like, hey, you're building on Avalanche, you see the vision, you're building a subnet. Let's figure out how we can then add gasoline to this fire and incentivize usage and adoption. But no, it's not limited to large publishers, right? Like use cases for subnets span a wide variety, and we want to make sure that we can address all of them. And so the way it usually works is, when game teams are closer to launch or proposed launch of their DApp, whether it's DeFi, NFTs, or gaming, they would apply on the website. We have a team that reviews these applications and then talk to the team. And if it's something that we want to invest and support, that's when it would basically be put up for a proposal to like the larger Multiverse kind of exec team, if you will, who then can work with the game on, or the game or DApp on what exactly those incentives are. And that can take the form of many things, right? It could be providing the Avox tokens required for validators. It can be liquidity incentives. It can be kind of co-marketing initiatives to market that subnet. There's a wide range of what we can do with our partners.
One of the larger barriers to switch topic, one of the larger barriers to entry for game studios with existing audiences is the high volume of in-game interactions often needed and the costs associated with that. What is that like on Avalanche?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah. So in terms of transaction cost, where does Avalanche fit in the picture for game studios with existing audiences, for example, who are looking for a high throughput, low cost blockchain to actually bring Web3 elements to their games?
Yeah, so I think we can separate that out to like C-chain and subnet transactions, right? Again, C-chain is kind of our public chain that anybody can build on. It's like that bridge to Ethereum as well. On the C-chain, I would say transactions usually can range from kind of a quarter of a penny to maybe 25 cents, depending on like the bandwidth at that given moment. We have seen moments where it's gone above that, but generally stays within that parameter. On a subnet, that's where it gets interesting, because you do have your own kind of private blockchain. Most of the transactions are about a fraction of a penny. And again, going back to what's cool about that is games can then set their own like fixed transaction fee. So in the world where you do have this inflationary token, where there's a lot of supply out there, imagine charging a good chunk of that inflationary token at scale. You can start burning off a lot of that. And then you can do cool things like you can take half of that and just burn them off. You can take half of them and reward a subset of your users, like your whales, or you can even reward the validators that are validating your subnet. So, the moment, and going back to Rowan's question around when does it make sense to move to a subnet, if even the relatively low fees on the C chain are starting to add up and be prohibitive of doing everything you want to do, maybe that's time to start looking at moving over to a subnet. And that's the future vision of that. We'll have games on the C chain, but we'll have a ton of individual game subnets as well as like platform subnets, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect. I'm just, oh, sorry.
No, please go on.
Jumping in a bit rudely. I was just curious, like, what resources are exactly needed for like a game developer to be able to make the step to the real subnet environment?
Yeah, there's a variety of things to think about, right? You need to first think about the validators for your subnet. We've got a base of over 1,600 validators on the main chain for Avalanche. You need to validate the main chain as well as a subnet. So there's a pool of people there, as well as oftentimes our games will want to run some of their own, or they might want some of their investors or other folks to validate that subnet. That's number one, right? Number two is figuring out the way to bridge in. So even if you're building a new game from scratch, you have to think about, okay, well, what if users want to extract some of these assets? Then you have to bridge your NFTs over to the C chain, or some of these assets over to the C chain. So working closely with our team on that. You've got the RPC endpoints. You've got things like the blockchain explorer. All those things are considerations, and we've we've gone through that a few times now with a few different games, right? DeFi Kingdoms and Crevata. There's a few more that are under construction or under development right now, and every time that our checklist of how we get games ready for launch or get dApps ready for launch gets stronger. So there's definitely like a list, but those are some of the key kind of decision factors of how they want to think about it. Alongside, if you are using a custom gas token and not AVAX, how all those economics work and tie into your game.
Yeah, and switching to reliability, one of the worst things that can happen to a successful game is downtime, right? So fortunately, Avalanche has shown it's a very stable for this. So the question will be, what features bring Avalanche for its stability?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. I think going back to that city analogy, right, where to make sure that the city is stable, we need to make sure that the infrastructure is well engineered for the long term, and we can upgrade and provide the ability to scale. And so we're the engineering team is constantly making improvements to kind of the EVM, right, just to optimize for transaction on the C chain, but then also having that like well designed and engineered public infrastructure, but then also making sure that we have the ability to scale horizontally, right, so that if the city does become crowded, then we can then offer new real estate for them to move on to in the form of subnets. So kind of that dynamic duo of consistently making these optimizations to the C chain to scale better, to lower transaction fees, but also providing an easy on-ramp for them to move to subnets, that makes a lot of sense if and when they need to.
Yeah, and around that, around speed, actually, Avalanche pride itself in its fast processing speed. So could you explain, I guess in layman's terms, how this is achieved, actually, why it is important, and what elements of a game Avalanche is capable of running?
Yeah, so traditionally you've had maybe like two different types of consensus, right? You've had classical consensus where your traditional like Fortune 500 companies use, where you've got a low number of validators, it's pretty centralized, and it works it's very fast, right? And then Nakamoto consensus was introduced alongside Bitcoin, where it's very decentralized, but beyond 100, it doesn't scale very well and can be kind of slow in terms of finalizing transactions. Avalanche consensus was introduced, and effectively what it does do is offers kind of a subsampling type mechanism. So basically, at any time, so in the nation state or the city example, if you're a country with a population of 100,000 and you're voting for a new law or something, all 100,000 citizens can equally actively participate. And we do this without slowing down this process, because everyone's broken up into tiny groups of 5. You can change your vote to match the majority, and you just keep sampling beyond that. And so it allows for us to scale up to a massive number of validators without sacrificing for speed. That's the extent of how I can explain. There's definitely more in the white paper, videos online, if there's more interest in learning more.
Maybe more focused on accessibility. In its simplest form, Avalanche can help developers launch tokens or NFTs to support their in-game economies or create those. But are there any specific requirements? Is there anything I should keep in mind as a developer when I'm looking to deploy a token, an NFT, or anything else on Avalanche?
That's a broad question. I would say, to get deployed and up and running on the C chain is pretty straightforward, and we've got a lot of like code samples there. And again, our team is there ready to help in terms of guidance or any questions that any game developer might have.
And maybe to build on that, there's already some middleware support, right? Companies like Automata are actively building on Avalanche. Is there any company like that's currently focusing on gaming, or anything that kind of touches the surface that could be interesting for game developers to look at?
Yeah, definitely. I think what's top of mind is obviously we've got a lot of really interesting wallet tools, right? Like Coinbase wallet, we've got like different login mechanisms like Magic Link and Web3 Auth. We've got other third-party providers like Chainstack and Moralis that make it easy to host and deploy a dApp. I talked a little about kind of the gaming backends, Stardust, FTX White Label, that are offering support, and they do things like NFT minting, custodial wallets, fiat on-ramps. So all these things are considerations when you're playing games. And, we're even looking at talking to the folks like Unreal and Unity who are looking at kind of getting closer to the blockchain side and making that easier.
And then maybe as a last question on this topic, we're seeing a growing pool of developers launch on Avalanche, right? Especially the C chain proved to be popular. Can you, at a high level, introduce to us what the C chain is and tell us what it implies in regards to EVM and interoperability?
Yeah, and again, I'll keep using that kind of city analogy, but the C chain is kind of the one city in the ecosystem that is EVM compatible right now, and that's where most of the dApps live on. And so the reason for that is obviously EVM is kind of like the JavaScript of the Web3 space, in that smart contract engineers are very hard to find these days. I'm sure you all know, but the majority of them are pretty familiar with Solidity and EVM. So it may not be the kind of the best and most efficient, but it's the most understood and adopted, and people use it. So we want to cater to the largest audience of developers to make it easy to easily spin up and deploy your own app, and then kind of bring them further down the red coin rabbit hole, if you will, to start exploring things like subnets and other pieces of our ecosystem.
The C chain is to get people hooked on Avalanche, in essence.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. And then from our side, I'm just gonna go with a soft final question. And I'm just very curious, as head of gaming now, what's your daily routine like? What's your life like? You said you were talking to a lot of companies. I've actually talked to some companies that actually literally mentioned also talking to you. And so you're very hands-on, you're very involved, but what's it like? How's your day?
Yeah, it's really dependent on that week, but we get one product of becoming more and more prominent in the GameFi space for Avalanche is that we get so many more kind of deal flow and so many more leads in different games. And so, a good chunk of my time is spent, either me or folks on my team going out and talking to all these games. We want to make sure there's kind of a face for anybody who wants to learn more about Avalanche and is building a game, right? A lot more of my time now is also spent, I would say, kind of focusing on education. So doing really cool podcasts like this, right? Or spreading the awareness of our games that are building on the platform, as well as like educating your more traditional large scale Web 2 publishers. Like, you've got Web 3 native teams that they know they want to build, and it's really easy to have that conversation. For traditional engineering teams or game developers, they may need some more education or some more convincing or sharing with their internal teams about the security of the platform, or the tools, or what a business relationship might look like. So I would say a lot more of my time these days is spent on how do we scale even larger beyond what we're doing right now, and that's in the form of traditional kind of large scale Web 2 publishers. That's what is the tooling that games need, because we're starting to see themes now, right? If multiple games are saying they need X feature, then it's on me and my team to go figure out, okay, do we figure out how we build this feature internally, or how do we partner with someone to be able to offer this as a value add to our games? And then the last chunk is, like I said, just figuring out marketing, how to spread the word even more about not only what we're doing, but our games, and letting it be known that we are a great destination for anybody looking to build a Web3 game.
Yeah, as a final question as well, I had a lot of conversation with BGA members around Avalanche, obviously, and quite a lot of excitement about the engagement behind the community in Avalanche, with some events, that recent event that you organized for developers. So I guess I got the answer based on the excitement I can level up from them. But as a relative young chain capturing audience and community are essentials, what can you tell us about your community size-wise and development, and how can developers benefit from the Avalanche community?
Yeah, I think we're I think you put it really well, but I think we just hit over 3 million cumulative wallets, and that number is growing pretty quickly. And I think we're in this sweet spot right now where I think we have a good amount of games deployed on the platform today, but I think the avalanche of games is coming, right? We've announced a lot of more like AAA large scale gaming experiences that are launching from anywhere between the end of this year to the end of next year and beyond. So right now is a really cool time, I think, if you're a developer deploying a game now, because you're hitting the sweet spot where I think we're people are very aware of us, are interested in learning more. And this is before like the massive funnel of all these different like large scale games are launching. So it's a really sweet spot right now. We're also starting to, anecdotally, to attract a lot more eyeballs in you're talking about esports and guilds. So, at this point, I would say we've got a really good blend of, maybe like smaller, like geo-focused guilds, and then large worldwide kind of top tier guilds and everything in between that are investing into our ecosystem. And then I said this earlier, but I think 360 degrees, there isn't like a crypto ecosystem that's better than ours, just because there are a lot of considerations beyond just the GameFi ecosystem for a chain, right? Is there liquidity on the chain? Are there actual users, guilds, DAOs, investment arms, DEXs, fair launch platforms? We have all of that, and we have very strong relationships with them, and we're able to kind of handhold our games to all the different components. So those are all like really appealing factors, I think, when it comes to deciding if you want to build on our chain.
Fantastic. How a blockchain game project could reach you? Do you have any means for them to reach you?
Yeah, I think the way to reach me right now, I think, is probably on Twitter. My handle is at EDC, and my DMs are open. And more than happy to listen to pitches and discuss GameFi, and then also introduce folks to the team who are all working on Web3 gaming right now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you for taking the time to give all the feedback and answer all the questions that we had. By the way, I love the analogy with the city along the conversation that we had. So thank you for that. And I would like also to thank Rowan and Ray. So thank you very much, guys, for this talk. It was very useful in terms of information. And yes, see you very soon.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Vlad.
Thank you.
Thank you.